Let's take you back to the Bloemfontein High Court. My colleague, eNCA senior reporter Silindelo Masikane, standing by at the back of that judgment being delivered. Slee, once again, good morning. Judge Lopes, of course, dismissing this application with costs.
Dismissing the application with costs. I mean, I think we were all quite keen to hear what Judge Philip Lopes was going to deliver. Quite an interesting judgment in terms of the facts that were put before him. But of course, we have heard in terms of the application being dismissed with costs. I just want to come a little bit closer. I do see Bobi Bereng, who of course we know is the auntie of Katlego Bereng. You've been following court proceedings quite closely. Are you satisfied with this judgment today?
100% satisfied. Not surprised though, because the way, considering the way SAPS and NPA had been handling the matter, so far we are 100% satisfied.
All right, thank you so much for your time, ma'am.
Pleasure.
All right. I do also see, of course, we have Dr. Nandipha's lawyer who is currently on the phone, so we will grab him at some point now. However, we were expecting to hear from the Home Affairs Department in terms of having officials possibly here to respond. But of course, we do see that they had just brought their legal teams to the courthouse. And of course, it's going to be quite disappointing for Dr. Nandipha's legal team, I guess, to go and have to deliver this news in Kroonstad to Dr. Nandipha. We're not too sure if she was able to actually watch those proceedings from the Kroonstad prison, but it does seem as though that the only issue that the judge picked up was with regards to the fact that it does seem on the face of it that Dr. Nandipha consented to her return to South Africa, knowing very well that she was going to face several charges in terms of aiding and abetting Facebook rapist Thabo Bester. But the judge did find that the process was not of a deportation, but rather of an extradition. And so in terms of that, that is certainly a win for Dr. Nandipha and her legal team. That the court does find that the deportation processes were not followed. This was an agreement between the South African and Tanzanian governments to have Bester and Nandipha brought back in the manner in which they did. They had to be escorted and so forth. However, on urgency as well, Judge Lopes says that her application did not meet the criteria when it comes to urgency, but for the interest of justice, he was then going to enroll it, and then of course going through some of the reasons as to what was said in the founding affidavits, the response, and the fact that there were a number of contradictions in some of the affidavits that were filed by officials from Home Affairs at the High Commission. One in particular, one of the secretaries of the High Commission had mentioned that they had received a notice saying that Nandipha as well as Bester were undesirable immigrants and that they were going to have to be deported, but also saying that an agreement had been reached between officials actually deporting the pair. So at this point, we did see a representative from the NPA. However, I don't see him at this moment, but in front of you now, Brajo, we'll be showing you that we do have Dr. Nandipha's legal team here. That is, of course, now going to have to make a decision as to whether they're going to appeal, whether they're just going to now let the processes in the magistrate's court rather unfold. I also do see that we have a representative from Action SA that has also been actually following proceedings quite closely here in the High Court. This is the chairman of Action SA here in the Free State, Ms. Patricia Kotana. Thank you so much for your time. Maybe just give me a sense as to how you view this particular judgment. I see a smile on your face.
Yes, you can see that I'm relieved.
Why are you relieved?
I feel like jumping.
For you, does this seem like a judgment that was quite thorough in terms of the facts of the matter? And perhaps do you find that, Dr. Nandipha despite what looks like an extradition, she should still remain behind bars.
Definitely, Dr. Nandipha, she has so much to answer to the South African people. We're here because we want to know what happened to Katleho Bereng. And for me, Dr. Nandipha, she's somebody who's very selfish. She has lost touch with reality. For her to come and, in the court of law, just to come and talk about how she's being arrested, she doesn't care about the people who have lost their life, the family that are still grieving for their loved ones. It clearly shows in South Africa when you had money, you will use your money just not to come and face the music or to come and face the court. But I really welcome the decision of our magistrate, Ntate Lobsha, to make sure that they've lost this case with cost. I know they're still going to come back to appeal this matter, but at the end of the day, South African people, we are not going to fold our hands. We believe in the rule of law. They must remain in jail and they must pay, they must be held accountable for what they did.
Thank you so much. All right. When we have a moment, Dumelo, we will be speaking to Dr. Nandipha's lawyer just to get a sense as to whether there will be any appeal processes and whether, of course, this is a blow in their matter in the magistrate's court. It does seem as though, of course, that she remains behind bars for now. And, of course, we see whether or not she will then take up that process to apply for bail.
All right. Well, of course, colleague, as we await to, I suppose, hear more of those reactions out in court. This, of course, at the back of those breaking news that Dr. Nandipha Magudumana's urgent application has been dismissed with costs. Let me head to Aviwe, Mtila, our senior reporter out in Kroonstad. I mean, Aviwe, I suppose the country joining in, the Bereng family, joining in Action SA, everyone in court, legal reps representing both the Home Affairs Department, other respondents, as well as Nandipha Magudumana, as to what Judge Philip Lobsa will decide this morning. And he has made his decision very clear that he has dismissed that application with costs. Now, I suppose it doesn't warrant much movement from where you stand, because had the decision been otherwise, and she was, of course, granted that application in her favor, would perhaps be expecting to see Dr. Nandipha Magudumana leaving prison.
Well, it would be a lot more movement just here at the Biza Makete Correctional Center, of course, in Kroonstad, where Dr. Nandipha Magudumana has been housed there for over a month. It seems like for the foreseeable future, she is still going to remain at this correctional facilities, given that that application was dismissed with cost there by Judge Lobsha, of course, at the High Court. But it comes with, a lot of factors which seem to suggest that even the process that was made back in Tanzania was some sort of agreement between the two countries, which suggests that indeed it could have been an extradition rather than a deportation. Because you understand, when it's a deportation, whoever is said, the fugitives themselves are taken to the borders and not actually handed over to the country. So another, some sort of glaring instances there mentioned by the judge, which made me actually call some legal experts to try and figure out what might happen going forward. And it seems like Professor Jacob Mofokeng suggests that she could pursue that legal case, that civil case against the state, suing them for that extradition, given that it was what she was suggesting. Given though she did consent, seemingly according to the judge there, given that there was suggestion that she wanted to go back to her children, knowing what lay ahead in South Africa. So she may pursue that. Another suggestion coming from Professor Jacob Mofokeng is that she may also head then to the Supreme Court of Appeal to appeal then this particular judgment. But of course, it's a wait and see from now on. But what we can give you for certainty now, Dumelo, is that for the foreseeable future, she is set to remain at the correctional facility that you see behind me. That is the Biza Makete Correctional Center that is in Kroonstad, where she has been housed, of course, since she got back to South Africa when she was taken back from Tanzania by that aircraft, of course, housing those officials from Home Affairs and coming at a tune of 1.4 million rand, we were told back then by the Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi.
And of course, colleague, for the fact that she's remaining behind bars is much to the satisfaction of both Katlego Bering's family, who's in court today, as well as Action SA as chairperson out in Free State, saying they're satisfied with, of course, this judgment by Judge Philip Lopser. Let me head back to court now, where, of course, Silindelo Masikane is still inside court, I understand, colleague, and we've been waiting to hear if we can get some reaction from some of the legal reps. What do you have?
I am joined by the lawyer that is representing Dr. Magudumana, that is Advocate Mtila. Thank you so much for your time. I think there's a bit of a win here for you, because the court declared that this was an extradition. However, it seems your client fell short when she agreed to come back to South Africa. Your reaction?
Yeah, look, from where we are, we listened attentively to the ratio decidendi, and from where we are, we will take instructions from our client, but we are satisfied that the allegations on whether or not this was a disguised, extradition has been confirmed. It's now settled. We know, as a matter of law, that the necessary processes involved in extradition were not followed. That brings, in our view, it will bring to rest this argument. But now the judge went further to deal with consent. To us, it's the sticky point. It's highly contentious. We will obviously take instructions on that. But initially, we had instructions on it. There was never consent of that nature. But even if the court were to find that there was consent, was that consent informed? So there is still, really low-hanging fruits in as far as this point is concerned. Yeah, but a whole lot of other issues seems to be in our favor. It seems to be in our favor if one, listened attentively to the court, the reasons for judgment. So we will be taking instructions. We'll be convening as a legal team to ventilate on a whole range and myriad of factors to, conduct a mapping exercise and know, the next move and plot the next move in respect of this case.
Of course, you're going to have to take instructions. Do you plan on going to Kroonstad perhaps this afternoon? And do you know if Dr. Nandipha was watching these proceedings?
I'm not sure if she was, but we are going to Kroonstad. We'll be heading to Kroonstad immediately, and we'll be there in no time to take instructions. We take this matter as quite very urgent. It involves someone's liberty, right to liberty, and as such, we just have to expeditiously and meticulously deal with it.
So an appeal is not off the cards?
It will not be out of the cards. Definitely.
All right. All right. There's only so much he can tell us until he can take instructions to Melo, but you can hear that disappointed, but of course vindicated in terms of what was said by Judge Lopser in affirming their contention around the fact that Dr. Nandipha was not deported, that an agreement was reached between the two governments, and that in fact extradition processes were the ones that were not followed. So in terms of the arguments that she was making, Dr. Nandipha has been vindicated in that, yes, this was a disguised extradition. This was a deportation disguised, an extradition rather, disguised as a deportation. And of course, we now know that unfortunately, it does seem on the face of it that she consented to her return, meaning that the judge says he had no option than to dismiss her urgent application with costs.